I want to demonstrate for you Lab 5 and talk about some of the specifics of it. Let's make it clean. So Lab 5 is similar to Lab 4 in that the socket programming will stay roughly the same. You're still going to be reading from a socket, reading a request, and then doing something with that request, and then sending out a response. But the protocol is going to be much different. Instead of this made-up protocol that we've been working with for the last couple of labs, now we're actually going to be using a real protocol, HTTP. So you're building an HTTP web server. So let's first start with the help, just to see what's going on here. So the only difference from Lab 4 is that now we have a folder. So this is an option that you can provide that tells the HTTP server where to serve files from relative to that path. The default is dot, meaning the current path, current folder that you're in, all the files will be relative to that. But you can change it if you want to specify which folder you want. Okay, so let's run it without any options, just the default options for now. Oops. But we will turn on verbose just so we can see output. So you can see it's got the relative path. That means it's going to be serving everything from Lab 5 folder. And it's running on port 8084, which is the default for this lab. Okay, we'll be using a tool called HTTPy. On the command line, it's just abbreviated HTTP, but it's a great tool for just sending out raw HTTP requests without dealing with a browser or anything like that. So we'll turn on verbose flag so that we can see the output of it, and then we'll request localhost because the server is running locally on my computer, port 8084. And then what file do we want? Well, let's see what our options are. So here's my Finder. It's going to be serving from relative from Lab 5. So these are my options right here. These are the files I can request. Let's do README first. So readme.md. Run that. You can see you got a lot of output from my server. Of course, your output can be different. But let's look at what HTTP sent first, the tool. So here's what it sent. The GET request with HTTP 1.1 and some headers. And let's compare that with what we received. So here I got a client connected, read in the request, and then here's the raw request. So those look the same. That's good. And then here's my parse request. It's showing me parsing various parts. So here's my request structure, and with all the headers parsed, and all the different components of the request parsed. So it's saying you'll have to be able to parse every single header in the request. And then I process things. I look for that file. I load it up, and then here's my response with what the status message is, the file that I'm going to be reading in, and the headers. You're required to support at least one header, the content length. You're welcome to support other headers. Web servers usually do. But for this lab, the only one you need to support is content length. And then it sends out that data. So here's what HTTPy got back. Looks right, looks like what we expected to send. And then sure enough, it got the file contents. Okay. So that's great. Now let's do a file that doesn't exist. Let's see how that works. So I'm gonna run this, and now I'm gonna just do bad.html, or it can be bad.anything. And you can see that we don't have a bad.html, so it's gonna try to open that file, and it's not gonna be there. So let's see what happens now. We got an error, so it could not open file. Good, but it didn't just crash or anything. It returns a response with a 404 not found, and it does send a response, and that's a requirement of this lab as well. Is that you have to send some kind of 404 error and a response, so that on a web browser you can see that it was a file not found in this case. So everything's working properly here. So now let me show you how it works with a different relative directory. So I'm going to change this, and I'm going to say -f for the folder and change it to www. So now it's going to be relative to this folder right here. Let's go in there and let's see what's there. So now I can let's request page.html. Okay, sure enough, I got it. Now, because it's not a web browser, it's only going to take requests at one thing. Inside this HTML, there's other referenced things like a style sheet. I have a background image as well for you download. So a web browser will be smart enough to pull those assets out and request them from your web server again. So you need to be able to support multiple requests from a client. So now let's go over to the web browser and see how this works. And this is something that you need to be able to support as well, is loading from a web browser. So let's do localhost. You can see my web browser's already requesting things because it tries to be really fast. Okay, there we go. So this is what it should look like. Maybe not initially, if you only have set up to support one request at, then you'll only see some of this. But eventually, to pass off the lab, you need to be able to support this where it's made multiple requests to load the styling for it, the CSS, to load the background image for this as well. So this is all part of it. And you can actually see, let's see, inspect it, you can see those multiple assets here in the networking tab. In terms of you got the page, got the background image, and you got the style. These are things from other websites. So they don't involve your web server at all. Okay, so that should all be there. Let's pull up a bad web page that does not exist. I shouldn't say bad. And that's what it should look like. File not found. One more thing I wanted to show is that your web server should be able to serve as big as files as we want it to. So I have a large image in the repository that you're welcome to use as a test for that. So large image. And it should be able to load that up just fine. It might take a little bit longer because it's such a big thing, but it should be able to load it. This is like a couple megabyte, I think 10 megabyte file that's loading up. You can see it's all chunked nicely by my server. It's not loading it all into once into memory because that would not scale. If you had to load a gigabyte file into memory, you'd run out of memory. So it needs to load it in chunk by chunk and send those chunks to the server and be able to display it. Okay, that's it for Lab 5.